Dearest listeners, is there anything more exquisite than watching a man attempt to deceive everyone, only to discover one person sees through every carefully constructed falsehood? Today, this author brings you the most delicious tale of a lady who could read lies like others read books, and a gentleman who discovered that the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. But let us not rush, for the best scandals, like the finest wine, must be savored properly. Lord Henry Somerset, Earl of Somerset, possessed what society considered the perfect combination of attributes: wealth substantial enough to forgive most sins, a title ancient enough to excuse the rest, and a face that caused debutantes to walk into pillars with alarming frequency. At 28, he had mastered the art of being exactly what everyone expected him to be: charming without warmth, witty without depth, present without truly being there. This author has observed his lordship for 3 seasons now, watching him navigate society's treacherous waters with the skill of a master sailor who has forgotten why he first went to sea. He smiled at precisely the right moments, 32 seconds into any amusing anecdote, regardless of actual humor. He laughed at precisely the right jokes, always the third count after the punchline, never sooner, never later. He danced with precisely the right partners, 2 dances with marriageable ladies of appropriate rank, one with his hostess, one with a wallflower to demonstrate kindness. He was, in essence, a perfectly calibrated social automaton, and everyone adored him for it. But perfection, gentle listeners, is exhausting to maintain. This author had noticed the slight tremor in his hand after particularly long evenings, barely visible as he reached for his 3rd brandy. The way his jaw clenched between smiles, a muscle jumping beneath the skin like a trapped bird. How his eyes would occasionally drift to the doors as if calculating escape routes, measuring distances, planning retreats from ballrooms that had become beautiful prisons. The Somerset family history perhaps explained this compulsive performance. His father, the late Earl, had been a man of volcanic temper and exacting standards who believed emotion was weakness and authenticity was vulnerability. His mother, still living but residing permanently in Bath for her nerves, had long ago retreated into laudanum and watercolors. Henry had learned before he could properly walk that survival meant becoming exactly what was expected. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing real. Enter Lady Celestine Harrington, the season's reigning diamond. At 19, she possessed the kind of beauty that made poets weep and portrait artists despair. Golden hair that seemed to generate its own light source, arranged each morning by a French maid who spent 2 hours creating an effect of casual elegance. Eyes the color of spring skies, so blue they seemed almost artificial, like painted porcelain. A complexion that suggested she had never encountered anything as vulgar as weather, maintained through a regime of milk baths and crushed pearl powder that cost more than most families' yearly income. She had been educated at the finest seminary for young ladies, Mrs. Thornfield's Academy for Gentle Refinement, where she had learned to paint watercolors of acceptable mediocrity, always flowers, never anything as challenging as a human face. Her pianoforte playing caused only minimal discomfort, having mastered exactly 3 pieces, which she rotated depending on the company. She could maintain a conversation about absolutely nothing for hours without apparent strain, having perfected the art of saying words without meaning, smiling without feeling, existing without truly living. The Harrington and Somerset families had been planning this match since before either party could walk. The settlements had been discussed over port when Henry was still in the nursery, his future decided between the fish course and the fowl. The engagement was considered such a foregone conclusion that the betting books at White's had closed years ago, the outcome as certain as sunrise. Lady Celestine and Lord Somerset were London's golden couple before they had exchanged more than a dozen words, their romance written by others before they had even met. But this tale, dearest listeners, is not truly about Lord Somerset or Lady Celestine. No, this story belongs to Miss Frances Whitley, and this author confesses to a particular fascination with this most unusual young lady. Frances occupied that peculiar position of poor relation that exists as both family and servant, neither fish nor fowl, forever suspended between 2 worlds without belonging to either. At 22, She had been Lady Celestine's companion since her parents' death 5 years prior. Victims of a carriage accident on the Dover Road that also claimed their modest fortune through some legal complexity involving entailments and a vindictive cousin who inherited everything despite having never met them. Where Celestine was golden sunshine, Frances was autumn twilight, brown hair that refused to hold a curl no matter how hot the tongs or how skilled the maid. It fell in gentle waves when left alone, but such naturalness was not permitted in polite society. Eyes that couldn't quite decide if they were gray or green, changing with the light and her mood like the Thames at dawn. A complexion that suggested she had, horror of horrors, actually walked outside without a parasol on occasion, bearing a faint constellation of freckles across her nose that powder could never quite conceal. She dressed in the colors of shadows, gray, brown, black, not from preference, but from necessity. Her gowns were Celestine's cast-offs, altered to be even less flattering, hemlines lowered, necklines raised, waistlines obscured, as if emphasizing her inferior position. She owned 3 gowns for day, 2 for evening, and 1 for church, rotating them with mathematical precision to avoid wearing the same dress to the same event within a month. But Frances possessed something far more dangerous than beauty, gentle listeners. She possessed the ability to see. This author cannot adequately explain this gift, for gift it surely was, though Frances might have called it a curse. Perhaps it came from years of sitting silently in corners, watching rather than participating, learning to read the subtle language of society from the outside. Perhaps it developed from necessity, learning to read the moods of those who controlled her fate, knowing when Lady Harrington's headache meant she was genuinely ill versus when it meant she was avoiding someone tiresome. Or perhaps some people are simply born with eyes that see past surfaces to the machinery beneath, blessed or cursed with clarity in a world that prizes beautiful obscurity. Adichum 1, O Fardeau du Dôme. The gift, however, came with its own particular burden. This author learned from a former governess of the Harrington household that Frances had once, at the age of 18, received what appeared to be a genuine act of kindness from a wealthy matron who offered to sponsor her for a season. The lady, Mrs. Pembroke, had spoken with apparent warmth about giving Frances opportunities her circumstances denied her. But Frances saw through the beautiful words to the ugly truth beneath. Mrs. Pembroke wanted a pretty companion for her plain daughter, someone who would make the girl look better by comparison whilst being grateful enough never to outshine her. When Frances politely declined, unable to bear living a lie even for her own advancement, Mrs. Pembroke's mask slipped entirely. She called Frances ungrateful, proud, and foolish, proving that Frances's gift had saved her from months of subtle cruelty disguised as charity. But the incident left its mark. Frances learned that day that seeing the truth behind kindness could be more painful than never receiving kindness at all. It made her doubt every smile, question every gesture of goodwill, wonder if anyone had ever been genuinely kind to her without ulterior motive. The gift that allowed her to see lies also condemned her to a profound loneliness, surrounded by people whose true feelings she could never unknow. The gift had manifested early. As a child, Frances had unnerved her parents by announcing when guests were lying about enjoying dinner or when the vicar was pretending interest in her father's interminable stories about his regiment. By age 12, she had learned to keep her observations to herself after being punished for embarrassing a wealthy aunt by noting that she was not, in fact, delighted to visit, but had come only to ensure she remained in the will. Whatever the cause, Frances could read lies like sheet music. She knew when Lady Harrington claimed to have a headache, but really wanted to avoid a tedious caller. The tell was a slight flutter of her left eyelid, combined with touching her temple with her middle finger, rather than her index. She knew when footmen blamed broken china on the cat when they had been sampling the wine. They always looked up and to the right while speaking, and their voices rose half an octave. She knew when Celestine professed delight at a gift she actually despised. Her smile would extend exactly 2 seconds longer than genuine pleasure would warrant. And most dangerously, she knew every single time Lord Somerset lied, which was, by her count, approximately 17 times per average social engagement, 23 during family dinners, and an astronomical 37 during the average ball. Their first significant interaction occurred at the Pemberton Ball 3 months into the season, on an evening when the heat was so oppressive that fans were fluttering like trapped butterflies throughout the ballroom. This author was perfectly positioned behind a convenient palm. One must maintain one's observation posts to witness the entire exchange. Lord Somerset had just finished dancing with Celestine, a waltz that society declared perfection itself, though this author noticed his smile never reached his eyes and her hand lay in his like a dead fish. They moved through the steps with the passion of clockwork figures, technically correct, but utterly devoid of feeling. When the music ended, he delivered her to where Francis stood guard like a particularly plain watchtower, stationed between a wilting flower arrangement and a footman who had been sampling the champagne. He complimented Celestine's dancing, declaring her the most graceful partner he had ever had the pleasure of leading. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, polished by years of similar untruths. Francis, who had been adjusting Celestine's glove, the third finger had torn during the dance, paused for just a moment. Her eyes flicked to his face, studying something invisible to the rest of us, tracking the microscopic tension in his jaw, the forced brightness of his eyes, the way his weight shifted almost imperceptibly to his back foot as if ready to flee. This author swears she very nearly smiled. Not a full smile, but a tiny quirk of her lips that suggested she found his performance both transparent and slightly amusing. That was all. A pause, a glance, an almost smile. But Lord Somerset noticed. Oh, how he noticed. His perfectly pleasant expression faltered for just an instant, like a mask slipping before being hastily readjusted. He looked at Francis properly for perhaps the first time, seeing not just the poor relation, but the person who had somehow detected his polite fiction. His eyes widened slightly, pupils dilating with the particular alarm of someone realizing they have been observed when they believe themselves alone. For the rest of that evening, this author observed him watching her with the wariness of a man who has discovered his private correspondence has been read. He would deliver a compliment to some young lady, then immediately glance at Francis to see her reaction. He would laugh at someone's joke and check if she had noticed the laugh was forced. He was, in essence, performing for an audience of one who refused to applaud. Francis, for her part, continued her duties as if nothing had happened, but there was something different in her bearing, a subtle satisfaction, perhaps, at being noticing. She moved through the ballroom with her usual quiet efficiency, fetching fans, adjusting trains, providing handkerchiefs, but now with the knowledge that at least one person knew she was more than furniture. The second incident occurred a week later at the opera, a production of Mozart's Don Giovanni that had been lauded by critics and was therefore obligatory viewing for anyone with pretensions to culture. Lord Somerset sat in the Harrington box, playing the devoted suitor to perfection. The box was positioned for maximum visibility, second tier, center, where all of society could observe the beautiful couple in their beautiful romance. He praised the soprano's performance, declaring it transcendent. The soprano in question had actually cracked on her highest note and forgotten half the words to her second aria. Francis, seated behind them in the shadows where companions belong, one must never upstage one's betters, made a small sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cough, but something that suggested profound disagreement, like a cat sneezing at a particularly offensive smell. Lord Somerset turned slightly, just enough to see her from the corner of his eye. Francis was looking at the stage, her expression perfectly neutral, but her hands were gripping her program so tightly the paper crumpled. She knew he had found the performance tedious. His fingers had been drumming Wagner's Tannhäuser Overture on his knee for the past 20 minutes. She knew he was calculating how many minutes until intermission. He had checked his pocket watch 6 times. She knew, and he knew she knew, and the knowing created a strange intimacy between them, like sharing a secret neither had spoken aloud. During intermission, while Celestine held court in the box, accepting admirers like a queen granting audiences, Lord Somerset excused himself. This author, naturally, followed at a discreet distance. He did not go to the gentleman's retiring room as announced, but instead stood in a shadowy alcove, pressing his palms against his temples as if trying to hold his skull together. Francis appeared moments later, sent to fetch Celestine's spare fan from the carriage. She had to pass his alcove, and for a moment they stood facing each other in the gaslit corridor. She looked at him, really looked at him, and this author saw her expression shift from neutral observation to something approaching concern. Lord Somerset asked, his voice barely audible, if she enjoyed the performance. Frances replied that she found it revealing, not the opera itself, but watching people pretend to enjoy something they clearly did not. She asked if he ever grew tired of pretending. He responded that he had been pretending so long he no longer remembered what was real. They stood there for a moment longer, two people recognizing something in each other that neither fully understood. Then voices approached. Celestine's tinkling laugh distinctive among them, and the spell broke. Frances curtsied and hurried past. Lord Somerset returned to his box. But something had shifted between them, some acknowledgement that they both saw through the beautiful facades surrounding them. Thus began the most peculiar dance this author has ever observed. At every social function where Lord Somerset paid court to Celestine, Frances was there, silent, shadow-like, but undeniably present. And with each interaction, their strange communication deepened. When he told Celestine her new gown was exquisite, a confection of pink silk and Brussels lace that made her look like an especially expensive bonbon, Frances would touch her throat, lie. The gown was overwrought and made Celestine look younger than her years, like a child playing dress-up. When he claimed to be enjoying Lady Pemberton's musicale, an evening of amateur sopranos murdering Italian arias, Frances would shift her fan from right hand to left, another lie. He was mentally composing a letter to his estate manager about drainage issues. When he professed enthusiasm for the wedding plans being discussed with increasing frequency and detail, Frances would simply look away, the biggest lie of all. Lord Somerset began arriving early to calls, knowing Frances would be arranging flowers or organizing Celestine's correspondence. He would enter the morning room where she worked and make statements to the empty air, testing her ability like a scientist conducting experiments. "The weather is uncommonly fine today," he might say. Frances would continue working, a slight nod indicating truth. He did indeed find the weather pleasant. "I am looking forward to the Ashworth ball this evening." Her hands would still for a moment. Lie. He dreaded it. "Lady Celestine grows more beautiful each day." She would actually flinch, not just a lie, but one that hurt to tell. "I find myself thinking of things I cannot have." Her head would snap up, eyes meeting his for one electric second. Truth. Absolute and dangerous truth. This author once witnessed him deliberately test her ability with increasing complexity. Standing in the Harrington morning room while Celestine was still abed, he made a series of statements. "My horse threw a shoe this morning." Frances nodded while arranging roses. Truth. "I encountered Lord Ashworth in the park, and we discussed politics." She tilted her head, considering, then made a slight gesture with her left hand. Partial truth. This author later learned he had seen Ashworth but avoided him by taking another path. "I enjoyed my ride immensely." She pressed her lips together and violently stabbed a rose into the arrangement, complete fabrication. He had spent the entire ride thinking about his approaching marriage with the enthusiasm of a man contemplating his execution. "I sometimes wonder what would happen if I simply disappeared." Frances dropped the entire vase. It shattered on the floor in a cascade of water, roses, and crystal shards. They both stared at the destruction, neither moving to clean it. "Truth," her reaction said. Dangerous, desperate truth. His expression after these demonstrations was that of a man who had discovered he was made of glass, and one person could see straight through to his very bones. To the frightened boy who had learned to lie before he learned to love. To the hollow spaces where authenticity should have lived. The situation intensified as the season progressed toward its inevitable conclusion. The formal announcement of Lord Somerset and Lady Celestine's engagement. The families had settled on the Harrington Ball for the grand announcement, inviting all of London to witness the triumph of appropriate matchmaking. The invitations alone cost more than most families spent in a year, delivered by footmen in the Harrington livery to ensure everyone understood the significance of the occasion. But as the date approached, something curious began to happen. Lord Somerset's lies, always frequent, became almost constant. He lied about small things, claiming to enjoy his breakfast when he had not touched it, the eggs congealing on his plate like yellow accusations. He lied about medium things, professing delight in wedding preparations that made him visibly ill, his complexion taking on a greenish cast whenever wedding clothes or honeymoon destinations were discussed. And he lied about large things, declaring his happiness to friends who asked about his impending nuptials, his voice bright and hollow as a bell with no clapper. Frances catalogued every falsehood with increasing agitation. This author observed her during this period, noting the shadows deepening under her eyes like purple bruises, testament to sleepless nights. The way her hands trembled slightly when Somerset was present, as if his lies were a physical weight she carried. How she had begun avoiding his gaze entirely, as if the burden of seeing his truth while everyone else saw his performance had become too much to bear. She began making mistakes in her duties, forgetting to pack Celestine's evening gloves, arranging flowers in the wrong rooms, serving tea with salt instead of sugar. Though this author suspects the last was not entirely accidental. Lady Harrington threatened to dismiss her twice, but Celestine, in a rare moment of perception, insisted Frances was merely nervous about the wedding and would improve. 3 days before the ball, this author witnessed a scene that still haunts her. Lord Somerset arrived for tea, and as usual, began his performance, complimenting the arrangements, praising the refreshments, expressing joy about the upcoming announcement. Frances stood in her usual corner, but instead of her typical subtle signals, she began to shake. Not dramatically, but a fine tremor that started in her hands and spread through her entire body. She was drowning in his lies, suffocating under the weight of truths only she could see. When he declared, with particular emphasis, that he had never been happier, Frances made a sound, half sob, half laugh, and fled the room. Lord Somerset's carefully maintained mask slipped entirely, revealing beneath it such raw anguish that even oblivious Celestine noticed. Adicione tu, a luta interna di Henry. The night before the Harrington ball, this author's most reliable source, Lord Somerset's valet, a man of impeccable discretion who owed this author a favor, reported a scene of remarkable intensity. His lordship had locked himself in his study at precisely 9 o'clock with a bottle of the finest French brandy and strict instructions not to be disturbed. The valet, concerned when no sounds emerged for hours, peered through the keyhole, a breach of protocol he justified by genuine worry for his master's welfare. Lord Somerset sat at his desk, the brandy untouched, surrounded by a sea of crumpled paper. He was writing letter after letter, each beginning with "Dear Lord and Lady Harrington," before being violently crossed out or torn to pieces. One draft, the valet reported, had gotten as far as, "I regret to inform you that circumstances beyond my control prevent me from," before being crushed into a ball and thrown into the fire. Another read, "The honor you do me by entrusting your daughter," before meeting a similar fate. For 6 hours, Lord Somerset wrote and destroyed, as if trying to find words that could free him without destroying everyone else. At 3 in the morning, he finally stopped writing. He sat staring at the blank paper before him, and the valet swears he saw his master's lips move in what might have been a prayer or might have been an apology to someone not present. He then burned every draft, watching the evidence of his struggle turn to ash, before finally drinking the brandy in one long swallow and retiring to bed. The crisis proper came a week before the ball, but after that tortured night. This author had positioned herself strategically in the Harrington Library, research for a novel, you understand, when Lord Somerset entered, clearly seeking solitude. He did not notice this author behind the substantial mythology section. 12 volumes of Greek myths provided excellent coverage. But he did notice Frances, seated in a window alcove with a book of poetry. The late afternoon light painted her in shades of gold and amber, transforming her ordinary features into something almost ethereal. She was reading Keats, this author noted, Ode on a Grecian Urn, rather appropriate, considering they were both trapped in a beautiful static tableau. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The air between them fairly crackled with unspoken words, suppressed truths, impossible possibilities. Then Lord Somerset did something unprecedented. He crossed the library and sat beside her, not properly at the other end of the window seat as propriety demanded, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. He asked if she enjoyed reading poetry. Frances responded that she found it revealing. Poets, she observed, told the truth even when they meant to lie, their metaphors betraying what their words concealed. He asked if she thought all men were liars. She replied that all people lied, but some lied to others, while some lied to themselves, and she found the latter far more tragic because they became prisoners in cells of their own making. He asked what she saw when she looked at Celestine. Frances considered before answering that she saw a lovely girl who had never been required to be anything more, who was perfectly content with her beautiful surface because no one had ever suggested she look beneath it. He asked, with sudden intensity, what she saw when she looked at herself. She was quiet for so long that dust motes had time to complete entire journeys through the afternoon sunlight. Finally, she said she tried not to look at herself at all, that it was easier to be invisible than to see what others refused to notice. He asked, with a directness that made this author hold her breath and nearly reveal her hiding spot, what she saw when she looked at him. Frances was silent for even longer this time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but each word fell like a stone into still water, creating ripples that would spread far beyond this room. She said she saw a man drowning in his own performance, who had played a role so long he had forgotten it was a role. She saw someone who had learned to lie before he learned to speak truth, who had been taught that authenticity was weakness and conformity was survival. She saw a man about to lock himself in a beautiful prison and throw away the key, condemning not just himself, but everyone around him to lives of polite misery. She saw, she said, someone she recognized because she too had learned to hide her true self, though for different reasons. Where he hid behind perfection, she hid behind plainness. Where he performed brilliance, she performed invisibility. They were, she suggested, opposite sides of the same counterfeit coin. The expression on Lord Somerset's face was that of a man hearing his death sentence read aloud in a language he finally understood. He stood abruptly, his body rigid with suppressed emotion, bowed formally, and left without another word. Frances remained in the window, the poetry book trembling in her hands, looking as if she had just confessed to murder and was awaiting judgment. This author remained hidden for another hour, partly from discretion, but mostly from shock at what she had witnessed. It was one thing to observe attraction, even inappropriate attraction. It was quite another to witness two souls recognizing each other across an impossible divide. The Harrington Ball arrived with all the pomp society could muster. No expense had been spared. The ballroom was transformed into a vision of white and gold, with enough orange blossoms to supply every wedding in London for a year. Their scent was so overwhelming that several ladies required smelling salts before the dancing even began. Crystal chandeliers blazed with enough candles to turn night into day, and an orchestra of 30 musicians had been imported from Vienna for the occasion. 500 of London's finest gathered to witness what everyone agreed would be the match of the season, possibly the decade. The Prince Regent himself had sent his regrets, but also his blessing, which Lady Harrington displayed prominently for all to see. This author secured an excellent position with clear views of all the principal players, having arrived unfashionably early to claim the best vantage point. Lady Celestine looked radiant in white silk that cost more than most people's annual income, embroidered with seed pearls and diamonds that caught the light with every movement. She resembled nothing so much as a fairy tale princess, which was, this author supposed, exactly the point. Lord Somerset was resplendent in black evening clothes that emphasized his broad shoulders and noble bearing, his cravat tied in a style so complex it had its own name, the Somerset Fall, soon to be copied by every aspiring dandy in London. They looked, everyone agreed, like figures from a fairy tale, too perfect to be real, which was perhaps more accurate than anyone realized. Frances stood in her usual position, slightly behind and to the left of Celestine, wearing a brown silk gown that had probably been fashionable 3 seasons ago when Celestine had first worn it. She kept her eyes downcast, her face carefully expressionless, but this author noticed the way her hands clenched and unclenched in the folds of her skirt, grasping at fabric as if it were the only solid thing in a world, tilting off its axis. The evening progressed with painful predictability. Lord Somerset danced the first dance with Celestine, a minuet that allowed for no improvisation, only perfect repetition of prescribed steps. Their movements were perfectly synchronized if utterly without passion, like automata in a music box, beautiful and lifeless. He delivered pretty compliments that Francis marked as lies with tiny movements. A shift of weight when he praised Celestine's gown, a touch to her collarbone when he claimed to be enjoying himself, a slight turn of her head when he spoke of their future happiness. She was translating his performance for an audience of one, herself, a lonely spectator to truth in a theater of beautiful falsity. Between dances, Lord Somerset's eyes would find Francis across the ballroom. Not obviously, he was too skilled a performer for that, but in glances stolen between conversations, in the moments when he turned from one partner to another, in the spaces between breaths. He was drowning in his own lies, and she was the only one who could see him sinking. The moment of announcement approached with the inevitability of an execution. Lord Somerset's father, a man who looked like his son would in 20 years, handsome, cold, and utterly certain of his right to control the world, called for silence. The orchestra stopped mid-measure. Conversations died mid-sentence. 500 people turned to watch the beautiful couple take their places for the formal announcement. Lord Somerset stepped forward, taking Celestine's hand with apparent devotion. She smiled up at him with the vacant prettiness of a porcelain doll, seeing not the man, but the title, not the person, but the position. He looked into her eyes and began to speak about their future together, about the happiness they would share, about the perfect life that awaited them. And Francis, standing in the shadows, began to cry. They were silent tears, sliding down her cheeks without any accompanying drama. She made no sound, no movement to wipe them away, just stood there crying as if her heart were breaking in real time, as if each of his pretty lies were physically cutting her. Lord Somerset saw them. In the middle of his pretty speech about wedded bliss, he glanced over Celestine's shoulder and saw Francis Whitley crying as if the world were ending. His words faltered. The sentence about eternal devotion died half-formed. The promise of happiness turned to ash in his mouth. He stopped mid-sentence. The entire ballroom held its breath. Celestine looked confused, her pretty face scrunching in an expression that suggested thought was physically uncomfortable. His parents looked alarmed, his mother's fan fluttering like a distressed bird. But Lord Somerset's eyes never left Francis's face, drawn to her tears like a compass to true north. Then, in a voice that carried to every corner of the silent ballroom, he asked Francis a single question. He asked if what he was about to do was the truth. The entire assembly turned to stare at the poor relation, the invisible companion, the nobody who had suddenly become the most important person in the room. Francis looked at him through her tears, and everyone watched as her mouth formed a single word: no. The word seemed to echo in the silence, bouncing off crystal chandeliers and golden walls, growing louder with each reverberation until it filled the entire space. No. Such a small word to destroy so many carefully laid plans. Lord Somerset released Celestine's hand as if it burned him. He turned to face the assembled crowd, and for the first time in this author's observation, his face showed genuine emotion, raw, painful, and absolutely real. He apologized, not the pretty polite apology of society, but a genuine expression of regret that seemed to come from his very soul. He could not marry Celestine, he declared, because it would be the greatest lie he had ever told, and someone had finally taught him that lies, no matter how beautiful, were still lies. He spoke of years spent performing a role written by others, of suffocating under the weight of expectations, of nearly losing himself entirely in the pursuit of being what everyone wanted. He looked at Francis again, and his voice broke slightly as he said that sometimes it took someone who could see through all your lies to show you the truth of who you really were. Sometimes salvation came not from those who accepted your performance, but from the one person who refused to applaud. The uproar was instantaneous and spectacular. Lady Harrington swooned with such violence she nearly knocked over a footman who had to catch her while balancing a tray of champagne. He managed both, earning himself a raise he would never receive. Lord Somerset's father turned an alarming shade of purple that suggested apoplexy was imminent. His mother gripped her fan so tightly it snapped, sending ivory pieces flying like shrapnel. But the greatest surprise came from Celestine herself. Instead of tears or hysteria, she laughed, actually laughed, a genuine sound this author had never heard from her before. She announced, with remarkable composure and volume, that thank heavens someone had finally said it because she had been in love with Mr. Theodore Bentley for 6 months and hadn't known how to tell anyone. Mr. Bentley, a second son with a modest income but genuine affection, nearly fainted from shock and joy combined. In the chaos that followed, and chaos it truly was, with matrons fainting, gentlemen shouting, and at least one dowager declaring this was why she preferred the last century, Frances disappeared. She simply vanished from the ballroom like smoke, leaving only a damp handkerchief on the chair where she had been standing. Lord Somerset searched for her everywhere. The garden where couples usually conducted assignations, the library where wallflowers traditionally hid, the servants' quarters where someone of her uncertain status might retreat. But Frances Whitley had perfected the art of invisibility over years of practice, and when she did not wish to be found, she became truly invisible. She left only a note, delivered to his residence the next morning by a crossing sweeper who had been paid a whole shilling to ensure its delivery. This author's sources, and they are impeccable, suggest it read, "You asked what I saw when I looked at you. I saw a man capable of truth, if he could only remember how to speak it. You remembered. Now forget me and live honestly. There is no place in your true life for someone like me. Be free, be real, be happy. That is all I ever wanted for you." But Lord Somerset, having finally learned to tell the truth, could not lie to himself about Frances Whitley. The truth was, and he knew it with the same certainty that Frances knew lies, that she was not meant to be forgotten. She was meant to be found, pursued, convinced, and loved with all the honesty he had just discovered he possessed. He spent the next 3 weeks searching for her with the dedication of a man possessed. He haunted employment agencies, leaving his card with instructions to contact him if anyone matching Frances's description sought a position. He questioned every companion in London, describing her with such detail and passion that rumors began to circulate about the Earl of Somerset's mysterious obsession. He even hired a Bow Street runner, Mr. Josiah Cribb, a man who could find anyone in London if they drew breath. But Frances had learned from the best. Years of making herself invisible had taught her how to disappear entirely when necessary. It was, ironically, her gift that gave her away. Mr. Cribb, a clever man who understood that everyone left traces, began investigating not Frances herself, but instances of unusual perceptiveness among servants and shop workers. He heard about a young woman working at a bookshop near Bloomsbury who had caught 3 different customers attempting to pass counterfeit coins, who knew when people couldn't actually read the books they were purchasing, who could tell when someone was buying a gift for a mistress versus a wife. Lord Somerset found her, finally, at Hartley's Books and Rare Manuscripts, a small shop squeezed between a milliner and a tobacco merchant on a street too narrow for proper carriages. She was cataloging a deceased scholar's library, surrounded by towers of Latin texts and Greek philosophy, looking more at home among the dead languages than she ever had in living society. This author was fortunate enough to witness their reunion through the shop's conveniently large front window. Research for a scene in a novel, naturally. The bell above the door announced his entrance with a cheerful tinkle that seemed to mock the gravity of the moment. Frances looked up from a first edition of Plato's Republic, and for the first time since this author had begun observing her, her face showed complete, unguarded surprise. She had not expected him to find her, had not thought herself worth finding. For a moment, neither spoke, the air between them thick with everything that had happened and everything that might happen still. Lord Somerset spoke for nearly 10 minutes without pause. This author could not hear every word through the window, but the gesture was clear. It was a confession, a declaration, a plea. He spoke with his hands as much as his words, gesturing with the passion of a man who had finally learned to feel and express genuine emotion. He told her, this author later learned, that he had spent 3 weeks seeing clearly for the first time in his life, and what he saw was that everything real and true and valuable centered on her. He said that she had saved him, not by loving him, but by seeing him, really seeing him, and refusing to accept the performance as the person. He spoke of the future, not the grand future of an earl and a countess, but the simple future of two people who saw each other clearly. He wanted, he said, to spend his life being honest with the one person who would always know if he was lying. He wanted to wake each morning knowing that someone saw him, not his title, not his wealth, not his performance, but him. Frances listened without moving, her extraordinary ability to read truth fully engaged. She watched his face with the intensity of someone reading a text in a language they were still learning, parsing every expression, every gesture, every breath. When he finally stopped speaking, she stood slowly, as if movement might break whatever spell held them. She walked around the desk, navigating the towers of books with careful precision. She stopped directly in front of him and placed her hand on his chest, directly over his heart. Whatever she felt there, whatever truth her gift revealed, it must have been satisfactory. She smiled, not the small, knowing smile this author had seen before, but a radiant expression that transformed her entirely. She was no longer plain, no longer invisible, no longer the forgotten poor relation. She was seen, and in being seen, she became beautiful. She told him that she saw him, truly saw him, and what she saw was a man worth loving. Not the earl, not the perfect gentleman, not the performance, but the frightened boy who had learned to lie to survive, the lonely man who had forgotten how to be real, the brave soul who had finally chosen truth over comfort. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony that scandalized society and delighted this author. The wedding took place at St. George's, but at the unfashionable hour of 8 in the morning, with only immediate family and a few close friends in attendance. Frances wore gray, not the gray of shadows and service, but the gray of morning mist, of silver, of storms about to break into sunshine. The dress was new, the first garment in years that had been made specifically for her, and she wore it like armor. Lord Somerset's family threatened disinheritance, but he seemed remarkably unconcerned. He had discovered that living truthfully, even with less money, was infinitely preferable to dying wealthy inside a beautiful lie. His father raged, his mother wept, but in the end, they could not legally prevent the marriage, only make their displeasure known through the withdrawal of additional financial support. Lady Celestine married her Mr. Bentley 3 months later in a ceremony that was everything her first engagement would have been. Grand, expensive, and utterly without depth. She was genuinely happy, which surprised everyone, including herself. She sent Frances a letter thanking her for saving them all from a terrible mistake and included a set of pearl earbobs that had been her grandmother's, the first gift between them that carried genuine sentiment rather than obligation. The new Lord and Lady Somerset became famous for their unusual household. They lived modestly for an earl and countess, keeping a small house in Grosvenor Square rather than the grand mansion his rank suggested. They employed servants who had been dismissed from other households for being too perceptive, too honest, or too real. Frances's gift for seeing lies made her a sought-after advisor, though she rarely used it for anything more serious than ensuring her husband never got away with claiming he did not want the last piece of cake or that he was not tired when he clearly needed rest. She discovered that her gift worked both ways. She could see lies, yes, but she could also see truth, and in Henry, she saw more truth than she had ever thought possible. They had 3 children, all of whom inherited their mother's unsettling ability to detect falsehood, making the Somerset household the most honest in London, and surprisingly, the happiest. Their eldest, a daughter named Verity, Henry's choice which made Frances laugh until she cried, once announced at age 4 that the Duke of Wellington was sad, even though he was smiling, causing a minor diplomatic incident and a major family legend. This author had tea with them just last month. Their house is comfortable rather than grand, filled with books and honest laughter rather than guilt and pretense. Lord Somerset declared the cakes delicious, the weather perfect, and his wife the most beautiful woman in England. Frances laughed at the first 2 claims, but said nothing about the third. Sometimes, this author learned, what seems like a lie is simply a truth that others cannot yet see. Lord Somerset looks at his wife and sees beauty that has nothing to do with conventional prettiness, and everything to do with being truly seen. Frances looks at her husband and sees courage that has nothing to do with military valor and everything to do with choosing truth in a world that rewards beautiful lies. They still play their game of truth and lies, though now it has become a form of intimacy rather than investigation. He will make statements. I love you more than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow. And she will judge their veracity with the same intensity she once brought to detecting social falsehoods. The answer, for the record, is always truth. Society eventually accepted them, as society always does when faced with a fait accompli backed by genuine happiness. The very people who had declared the match impossible now claimed they had always known Frances was special. Lady Harrington herself was heard to say at tea that she had always suspected dear Frances of hidden depths, a statement so magnificently untrue that Frances, hearing of it, laughed for 10 solid minutes. And so, gentle listeners, another tale reaches its blessed conclusion. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give another is not blind acceptance, but clear sight. Sometimes love means seeing someone's lies not to condemn them, but to free them from the prison of their own pretense. And sometimes the person who sees us most clearly is the only one who can truly love us, because they love not who we pretend to be, but who we actually are. This author withdraws until our next encounter, leaving you with this thought. In a world full of beautiful performances, perhaps the bravest thing we can do is to find someone who sees through our acts and love them for showing us the truth. Until then, remember, the greatest scandals often lead to the greatest happiness, and sometimes the person who sees all our lies is the only one who can help us find our truth. Your devoted chronicler, Lady Ravenswood.